through how to find a core belief. So we've done a belief sweep, we've taken inventory, and we've decided what sort of limiting stories we're carrying. And this can be in the form of any beliefs we have. And these are not just internal beliefs, but external beliefs. And so things like, okay, people can't be trusted, or the world's too difficult of a place. These would be good examples of beliefs that exist within your reality filter. And there will be a lot of thoughts that come with these beliefs. Your core beliefs, you'll hear me refer to a lot, these are going to be your internal beliefs, the core things that you believe about yourself. And these are going to come a lot of the time in the form of I am statements. If you look in your workbook, you will see on page 5 that you have a list of the core negative beliefs. So through all my experiences and working with many different individuals, I've been able to pinpoint the core limiting beliefs that we carry about ourselves. So in this exercise, in this module, I'm going to show you how to find these core beliefs so that you can understand what it may be that you are carrying. So remember, we have that equation, the BTEA equation, where beliefs create the thoughts create the emotions create the actions or behaviors. What we're basically going to be doing is we're going to be rewinding this equation. So this is one of the first important things that I want you to note in this module, and it's that emotions are feedback. We spend a lot of time in our lives thinking that our emotions are so challenging or difficult, and we go to great lengths to avoid them, to repress them, to ignore them. Our emotions are like our best friends. They are always giving us valuable feedback about what's going on inside of us. Emotions are only there to serve you. So for example, if I start thinking negative thoughts about myself around people, oh, people don't like me, oh, these people are judging me, of course it's going to create an emotional response. That emotional response isn't there for you to just suffer for no reason. That emotion is like a guide letting you know that at a subconscious level, you are running thought and belief patterns that are actually not serving you. So your emotions are basically a reflection of your mind in the body, because all emotions are experienced as sensations in the body, and they're helping you to make the subconsciously stored content of your filter conscious. So they're actually providing you with a wonderful opportunity for growth and awareness. And we're going to get all into emotions in so much depth in the next couple of modules, but for now, I want you to know that those emotions are basically feedback mechanisms, and to treat them as anything different than that is to create a lot of unnecessary suffering in your life. So we're going to take the E from the BTEA equation, and we're going to work backwards. So in your mind, as you pull up your work where there's that chart of all the core limiting beliefs, so you'll see them, that they say things like, I am powerless, I am not good enough, I am trapped, I am unloved, I am not likable, I am unsafe, all these beliefs that are existing in that chart, and there's about 22 core ones. I want you to take a look at that, and I want you to think in your mind of a time or a situation that triggered you. So something that upset you or made you feel emotionally charged. And with that piece in mind, that your emotions are just feedback mechanisms to help you make the subconsciously stored content conscious, I want you to first label the emotions that you experienced. The reason it's really important to label the emotions that you're experiencing is because it sort of helps you find your way through this process itself. It sort of like shines the light of your conscious awareness into the contents of your subconscious mind. So as an analogy, think about this. Imagine you go into a strange house that you've never been in before, and your job in the pitch black is to find your way from the front door to the back door and let yourself out. If you've never been in this house before and you don't know anything that exists within it, you're going to have a really hard time kind of fumbling your way around, and you're going to run into tables and walls and all sorts of things trying to get to the back door. Now, let's say instead we pause and you turn on all the lights and you get to go see your way around the house from the front door to the back door. And then we turn off all the lights again and it's pitch black, and you have to do that same exercise, but you've already seen what exists in there. It's going to be much easier for you to find your path out. And this is the analogy I'll use to, going through these exercises. What we're doing is we're turning on all the lights first, and we're helping shine the light of your conscious awareness into your subconscious mind so that you have the availability to, in real time, when triggering situations come back out, you know your path out this time, and it's going to be much easier. You don't have to bump into so many things on your way out. So think of a situation that triggered you and label the emotions that you experience in the situation. And you'll see that these tend to be probably emotions you experience fairly often. We all tend to experience 8 or 9 core negative emotions fairly repetitively. And we'll talk about this a little bit again when we go into the emotions module and we talk about our individual emotional patterns. So label your emotions. And again, in your workbook, you've got a sheet that has all these negative emotions and their opposites. So label the negative ones that you experience, maybe highlight them if that's the easiest way for you. And then I want you to ask yourself, what did you make that situation mean about you? And I'm going to give you another analogy to properly illustrate this. One time, quite a few years ago now, I had a couple come into my office. And the woman in the relationship, she was so angry at her husband for the laundry being left on the floor. Like, she was 10 out of 10 angry. And her hands were actually like visibly shaking. And her husband, as his wife is getting very angry, he starts to like emotionally shut down. And I saw his body language become sort of reclusive, and you could see that he was really hurt and sad. And so here's one individual, 10 out of 10 angry, and another individual, like at least an 8 out of 10 sad and hurt. And you know that there's no way that these two people are talking about the clothing on a floor. That's not what the issue is here. So I asked the woman, I said, well, what do you make it mean about you when the clothes are left on the floor? And she goes, well, I'm disrespected. He's not respecting me. And I asked him, what do you make it mean about you when your wife starts to get really angry about this? And he goes, well, she must not love me very much if she's just mad over something so small. So here are two individuals trying to, who are feeling disrespected and unloved, and they're trying to resolve the situation by discussing the clothing on a floor. And this is what we all do. The situations that trigger us and make us feel charged, it's not about the cupboard being left open. It's not about the person cutting you off on the street. It's about the subconscious meaning that's stored in your filter of reality, that's activated and being projected onto the circumstance. And that is what's triggering you and causing you pain, not the circumstance itself. And this is why, like, one person can get cut off and be totally fine with it and neutral, and another person gets so frustrated and upset. It's because it's about the individual meaning we're assigning to things without our own conscious awareness. So this is valuable information when you get triggered. Every time you're triggered is like an opportunity for growth, so that you can actually start patterning or reprogramming these core things that exist within you. So step 1, think of a time that you were triggered or upset. Step 2, label your emotions through the sheet. Again, this is helping to just like bring the light of consciousness to your entire experience. Step 3, I want you to ask yourself, what did you make that situation mean about you? Or what meaning did you give to that situation? Okay? And try to do it first without looking at that sheet of core wounds. Okay? Because sometimes our mind can just jump right to the conclusion, and I want you to try to let yourself go through this process, because you'll find a little bit more about yourself this way. So after you have that, so let's say the example is the laundry's on the floor. And let's say that you go, okay, what do you make that mean about you? And let's say your first thought is, well, it shouldn't be on the floor. Okay? So what you're doing is you're taking the BTEA equation, you're starting at the emotions, and you're going back to the thoughts, and you'll see that you have lots of interesting thoughts. It shouldn't be on the floor. I always ask about this. I always ask him to pick it up. He ignores me. And then as you sort of dump all of those thoughts onto paper, as you make all of these subconscious things conscious, then I want you to keep asking yourself, well, what would that then mean? Or what are you afraid would happen next? And as you keep asking, you can just keep rotating between these questions, you'll see that your core limiting beliefs come out. You might be able to just really quickly know, oh my goodness, it's that I feel unsafe, or it's that I feel disrespected, or I feel powerless, or I feel unheard or unseen. You might know that, and that's okay too. But you can do the thought piece if you're interested, just to gather more awareness of the full picture of what's going on at both the belief and thought level. So again, your steps. Think of a situation that triggered you. Label the emotions that you're experiencing, frustration, anger, hurt, whatever it may be. Ask yourself, what did you make that situation mean about you? And then keep rotating the questions. And what would that then mean? Or what are you afraid could happen next? And you'll see that there's a core belief that exists in there. And then I want you just to open your awareness even more. Ask yourself, when you've completed those steps, where else do you experience this in your life? So let's say the core wound is I am disrespected. Where else do you feel disrespected by people? And what you'll see, because remember we were saying earlier that a lot of our thoughts and belief patterns are repeating in so many different categories of life, even though our external environment changes. I want you to just notice where else you experience this belief. You'll probably see that it shows up almost pervasively, that these things tend to show up over and over again in our career, in our romantic relationships, in our friendships, in our finances, in all these different areas of our life. And so what you're doing through this exercise is you're making the deeply subconscious quite conscious. So put that in the workbook as you start to write down these core beliefs so you can keep inventory, okay? I'm going to give you a few other little analogies just to highlight this. Okay, so your emotions, you're pulling backwards. So that the beliefs create the thoughts, which create the emotional responses, which are, again, made up of those neurochemicals. You're just going backwards. The emotions are giving me feedback for what thought and belief patterns I'm running. So let's say, for example, if you've ever been in your car, and let's say you're late to work, okay? And maybe you've never been late to work before, and maybe you have so much job security. Maybe you've been in the same position for 10 years and you're hardly late and you've never been in any trouble, but you might be sitting in your car late to work and you might be panicking, you might be really stressed out. And if this is the case, chances are you're projecting some kind of unconscious story onto the experience itself. So what you would do is you'd ask yourself, okay, what am I making this situation mean, or what am I afraid would then happen next? And so let's say you feel panic and stress and fear, and you want to ask yourself, okay, what was I just thinking about that's creating all of these emotions? Because again, the emotions are the result, they're the output of these thoughts and belief patterns being activated in your subconscious filter. And so maybe you're like, I will be late. And okay, if you're late, what does that then mean? Or what are you afraid would happen next? Well, then I'll be fired. Okay, and then what are you afraid will happen? Well, then I will be, I won't have enough money, and then I'll be homeless, and then I will be unsafe. And so you might get to this, you might find all these really beautiful, not beautiful negative thoughts, but like beautiful breakthroughs around what negative thoughts exist, and all these beautiful awarenesses come up. And from there, you'll find that they're all relating to that core belief. And remember, that core belief is like that tree trunk with all these tree branches coming off. You'll know as well if it's a really important belief because it'll feel really triggering when you think of it. Like, oh my gosh, I'll get fired and then then I'm not good enough, right? It could be I'm not good enough. So again, it's very individual. So just feel into the beliefs that show up for you and the thoughts that show up for you, and feel which ones tend to make you feel the most uncomfortable. And you'll actually be able to tell because you'll notice that your body reacts a little bit. You notice tension in your body, or you tighten your chest, or you clench your fist, or all kinds of little tiny feedback mechanisms that are happening because your body and mind are always in a state of interaction if you pay close attention. So emotions are your guides, and they're literally here to help you understand what's going on beneath the surface. So this is the exercise in how to find core beliefs. And in the next module, we'll get into how to neutralize some of these core beliefs. And then we're going to dive right into emotions and thoughts. And then lastly, we're going to go into reprogramming, which is my favorite part of this experience. How to find a core belief. So this is a really powerful exercise when we are trying to find those core I am beliefs from those external beliefs. So women are catty and I am unsafe, just like that example we use. I'm going to show you exactly how to find out what you believe about yourself, because this is the root, the deepest root of why we feel uncomfortable in situations, or why we experience emotional suffering, is because of the meaning we give, not just to the people. That affects us secondarily, but the primary, strongest negative emotion we feel is what we make an experience mean about ourselves, even if it's involving others, okay? So the purpose of this exercise is to use your negative emotions as the feedback that they are, in order to find the meaning you give to experiences at that subconscious level. This will help you again to make the subconscious contents of your mind conscious. You can think of this as you using your emotions as a rope that helps you to pull up subconscious information from a well below. So imagine, you're pulling up this rope and you're gathering all of that information. You're bringing it to the conscious level, and now you can do something about it. Before, whenever there's a Carl Jung quote, and it's like, in not word for word, but verbatim, not verbatim, he says something along the lines of, as long as things remain unconscious, they will direct our lives and we will call it fate. Okay? And essentially what he's saying is that when we don't know things, we're just making decisions. We're just taking action based on things we're not aware of. And so we don't get any conscious say. If we are not conscious of these things, then we don't have control. So this brings us to our discovery. I want you to start by describing a situation that made you feel emotionally charged in a negative way. An example could be, I was upset yesterday when my mother criticized me. So you're just in this one here, you were literally just isolating the specific thing that upset you. Okay? So yesterday, I was upset when my mother criticized me. Really clear. Remember, the more isolated, the better. Number 2, describe the 2 to 3 emotions you feel in regards to the situation. You can refer to the emotions list at the back of the workbook. Remember, you've got that resource area, and in that resource area in your workbook, you have all of the emotions and their opposites, all major emotions. We could add some more to that list, but all major ones that we really want to work with. Okay, so for example, I felt angry, frustrated, helpless. Specifically the emotions, not my mother was annoying, not anything like that. Your emotions and your experience. Number 3, what are you afraid could happen or did happen in a situation? Or why would that be bad? Okay, and what you're trying to find here is essentially, again, like that rope you're pulling up, you're starting to pull up the meaning. And this is the way of doing it. This is the way of understanding specifically what your internal relationship is to this painful external experience. Okay, so I'm afraid that my mother will say negative things about me to other family members or friends. Now, what meaning do you give that experience? Or what are you then fearing could happen? And if you keep asking yourself this question, you'll get to a core belief. So for example, I'm afraid my mother will say negative things about me. Well, why would that matter? Why would that bother you personally? Because somebody might feel really adjusted to a critical mother. Oh, my mother always says negative things, but she's just a little bit like that, and she's always critical, and it's no big deal. But if you're suffering, it's because you give that personal meaning. So you might say, okay, well, I'm afraid that I'll be judged. I'm afraid I will experience feeling I am rejected, I am disrespected, I am disliked. And this, you're going to get to the very root. And if you need a cue or a prompter, then you can look at the core belief chart again. Remember, the core wounds are those internal I am core wounds. And that's really what you're diving into to see. Because these are the really painful stories you are carrying about yourself. And then you're going out into the world, interacting through the lens of these stories. And like we said, people don't make you feel anything. They help you feel what's already there. Bob down the street might say, I'm disrespected. Or he might just go, my mother's crazy and it doesn't mean anything to me. She's always critical. That's just how she's always been. It's not personal. I understand her. But Jane might go, oh my gosh, when my mother criticizes me, I feel unloved. I feel like my mother doesn't love me. Or I feel like she's publicly humiliating me and I think I'm going to be disliked and disrespected by everybody, or rejected or exiled. So you're looking at the end of the day for those core internal I am statements. And again, if you just keep isolating a situation, noticing the emotions of what your relationship is to the emotions that are bothering you, and then asking yourself, okay, what am I afraid could happen? What's the personal meaning I give to this situation? If mom's criticizing, what does that mean? Or why is that bad? And if you keep asking yourself that, or what am I afraid could happen, you're going to find that you go, oh, I'm afraid at the root level that I am rejected, I am disrespected, I am disliked. Okay? Really important to recognize. Now, each time you feel emotionally dysregulated, practice isolating the experience that upsets you, and then continue asking yourself question number 4. Okay, oh, I feel upset right now. what am I making this situation mean, or why would it be bad? And you'll see the reason it hurts, and it's personal to you, and also the reason why different experiences affect different people in different ways. Two people can be stuck in traffic, and one person can be feeling very trapped, and I am trapped, or I am helpless, or I am powerless, can be really painful core wounds. And somebody else can be like, why are you making a big deal? We can't do anything about traffic. Well, the reason experiences affect some people more than others are literally because of the internal core wounds that are alive inside of us that need healing and reprogramming that we are projecting out onto our external experiences. And so this will help you to get really aware about these core wounds and understand them. Okay? And see how right now we're starting to just get like a full inventory of your subconscious mind. We're really trying to clarify in the first half of this workbook who you are at the subconscious level and what parts of your subconscious paradigm and programming are not serving you. And it's like this deep introspection work, and then we can dive right into the reprogramming, and it's super easy to knock out because you're really clear about the things that bother you. So the purpose of this exercise is to make as many painful patterns conscious as possible, so you can identify essentially the entire thread of what's triggering you. This will help you to then recognize and understand different patterns more effectively, which are essentially the prerequisites to the equilibrating and reprogramming work, which we are going to be doing in the next modules. So think of this exercise as being an audit. Okay, you're auditing your patterns, and you're going to try to come up with as many as you possibly can. So you can think of a triggering event, and just try to think of the types of things that trigger you. So it may be if someone dismisses me. It may be if someone is overly critical. It could be if someone breaks my trust or betrays me. It could be if someone rejects me or disrespects me. I guess those could sort of be two separate things, but I can go like this just to clarify. If someone disrespects me. So then what you're going to do here is for each of the examples you come up with, and you've got lots of room, you can keep pushing enter at the end, and your space literally goes on forever. So as you go through, you want to look at like, okay, what are the beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and actions? You're following the thread. So if somebody dismisses me, what core beliefs come up? Maybe you recognize, and remember, you can refer to the chart as well at the back of your workbook. Maybe you go, I start to believe that I am unworthy. I am unimportant, right? Those are common ones. And those are the core beliefs triggered. And then what types of thought patterns do you have when someone dismisses you? Maybe you think everyone is rude. Why bother being in a relationship? Maybe you think, you can have all sorts of thoughts that come up. Maybe you think, nobody cares about me. I don't deserve to be cared about. I don't matter to anybody. Maybe you start having those types of thought patterns. So you're just surfacing them. Then, what types of emotions do you feel when this is happening? Maybe you feel hurt, angry, sad, and you can refer to your emotions list at the back of your workbook as well. And then what actions or coping mechanisms do you have? And so maybe you say, I push that person away. Maybe you say, I cut that person out of my life. Maybe you say, I become spiteful, right? So try to look at like these different patterns, and the clearer we become ahead of time about these things, the easier they are to then recognize later when they're happening. And obviously you can also plug these things into the different reprogramming tools as we go into them throughout this course. So you can do your action reprogramming, your thought reprogramming, your belief reprogramming using auto-suggestion. So you're really auditing so you can set yourself up for the next exercises. And by doing this ahead of time, by bringing these things to the forefront of your conscious awareness, you essentially give yourself the opportunity to be able to recognize and catch these things in real time more often and more effectively. So this is the work for here. Take your time to do this. Make sure you fill out everything. And I hope you enjoy finding all of your patterns. Welcome to Module 3, Part 2. Now we're going to go through how to actually do your first piece of work on neutralizing core beliefs. So let me give you a little bit of context for how to do this first, and then I'm going to take you through this part of the exercise. So number one, I want you to think of beliefs as basically thoughts or those emotional inferences I was talking about at the very beginning of this course that over time were laced with lots of emotion. And remember that key point that I said I was going to bring up a lot, how your subconscious mind is programmed through repetition plus emotion. So a belief is essentially like a deeply wired thought that's been laced with tons of emotion over time. So a belief will sometimes be activated so quickly it will almost feel like a feeling or an emotion. And you can think of it as sort of like this neural network that many things stem off of. So again, using that analogy of a tree, and then you've got your tree branches, which are like those thoughts, and then you've got your emotions, which are kind of like the leaves of the tree. And so what your emotions are really helping to do is to trace that system backwards so that you're getting to the roots or the trunk. And so what you're going to be doing is, again, anytime you're emotionally triggered or charged, that's an important feedback mechanism. A reminder, again, your emotions are your friends. They're there to serve you and to show you to yourself. So most of our beliefs are unquestioned because they're out of our awareness. Anything that's subconscious, we are basically responding to as if it's an absolute truth. So think about that for a moment. Think of the impact of that. Let's say you have a core stored belief about yourself that says, I'm not good enough. And then because you haven't made that information conscious and questioned it and repatterned it, you go into a job interview. And you go into that job interview with that assumption. Now you're going into that interview trying to overpower yourself. You're trying to be your best self and show up well while believing and emotionally feeling already as if you're not good enough for that job. So I'm going to use that example in a moment to show you the other side of how to work this out. So most of our beliefs, again, are in question because they are out of our awareness. Anything that's subconscious, where we tend to be believing and reacting to as if it's real, as if it's true. And your brain can't really tell the difference very well between what is visualized and what is real. So researchers have been doing, tons of experiments around this for a very long time. But there is an experiment that literally took participants and had one test group exercise their biceps for 6 weeks, and another study group just visualized that they were exercising their biceps for 6 weeks, and it was for half an hour a day, and literally both groups had very similar results in bicep growth, just because your brain is literally responding to and impacting your physiology so intensely. And one of the key ingredients I asked participants to use in this group, or in this study group, who was just visualizing exercising their biceps, they asked participants to make sure they laced emotion into the equation. So they felt like they were really pushing hard and working hard to strengthen their biceps. And so that key ingredient is really important when we're doing our own reprogramming work. So one of the main ways we suffer, just before we go into the actual repatterning part for this module of beliefs, one of the main ways we suffer is because we are buying into our beliefs as if they're the truth, and then the thoughts that come with them accordingly. So you can think of pain in our life as sort of like our unmet needs, and suffering being the story we tell about the pain. So let's say, for example, I was speaking to somebody earlier and they were telling me that the last time they felt emotionally activated or triggered was when their roommate was super social and having a super social week when they weren't feeling their best. And the thoughts and beliefs that they were creating out of this, the way that they were emotionally inferring or interpreting this was, oh, this person doesn't care about me, I'm not feeling well, and she's not even noticing. And so the pain in that situation would be the unmet needs. Maybe the person feeling not 100% and needing to feel healthy and good and vibrant. And the suffering was the story or the meaning that they gave to that experience itself. So this person doesn't care about me. Maybe they had a core belief activated like I am excluded or I am alone. And so the belief patterns that exist in there and the story that's created around the unmet needs is our suffering. And the really cool part about this is that is changeable and controllable, because again, it's just perceptually based. So how do you neutralize your core beliefs? Well, in the first place, you've got core beliefs through those key ingredients, the repetition plus emotion. So step one, you have to question the belief itself. You have to question the meaning that you're giving to a painful situation. So let's use an example of two partners. And let's say that one partner is very cold and very dismissive. And let's say when they go through stress, they tend to become even more cold and more withdrawn and dismissive, because maybe that's one of their subconscious coping mechanisms. And let's say there's another partner. Let's say that partner tends to have anxious attachment style tendencies. So they can be very needy and emotional and need a lot of attention and validation and reinforcement from their partner. What you'll often see in this dynamic is that the withdrawn partner, when they're stressed, pulls away, and the story that the other partner, the anxious partner, makes of this is, I am unloved, I am not cared about, I'm not good enough for them. And then they tend to act out on more the stories that they're creating and less the needs that are unmet, because suffering is really what tends to breed these unconscious actions or coping mechanisms that tend to be like really out of alignment with our true selves, of how we would want to act when we are in a really conscious and healthy state. So we first have to notice the impact of this, and we have to question it. So let's say you're the anxious partner, and let's say this is a female, and she goes, okay, my partner doesn't love me because he's a little bit cold today. Is it true? And think of the impact of just making this conscious and questioning it. And you want to ask, not just is it true, but can I 100% know this is true? Or is it possible that this is an assumption based on my own reality filter or previously stored core wounds from early childhood experiences? And keep in mind, they won't always be early childhood experiences. This tends to be where we pick up on these things, and they tend to reinforce more and more over time, because again, remember, we've got a reticular activating system working to keep feeding them basically. But so they may not be just early childhood. They can also be from some kind of painful adult experience that we've had. It could be recent or further back. But the point is that you want to make a separation or a distinction between what is 100% truth and what is a story that you're creating as a subconscious strategy to somehow protect yourself. Okay? So step one, identify the core belief using the previous exercises that we had. And then when you notice yourself projecting this onto an experience, use that emotional feedback when you're not feeling good to recognize and go inwards and ask yourself, is this story or is what I'm believing in the situation 100% true? Or could it possibly be an assumption based on some kind of wound that exists in my subconscious mind or my reality filter? Okay. The next thing you want to do, okay, step 3 here. I want you to feed the opposition consciously so that you're actually equilibrating the emotion attached to this experience. So I'm going to explain this for a moment. What does this mean? Let's say that you go for a job interview, okay? And let's say that the person sits down with you and says, why are you a good fit for this role? And you say to this person, because I'm good enough. And let's say you say to this person a whole bunch of times, because I'm good enough, because I'm good enough, because I'm good enough. You're not really convincing this person of anything. And the same thing works for us. We get convinced by proof. And our mind sort of bites, so to speak, like feeds into and believes the things that we've got proof for. Why? Because all memory is stored by your subconscious mind. Your subconscious holds on to everything. And all of these memories are colored with the emotion of the experience itself. So if I were to say to you, tell me your happiest childhood memory, and close your eyes. You might close your eyes and tell me your happiest childhood memory and start smiling, or start feeling positive emotion and feel that positive flow of those neurochemicals throughout your physiology. And this is because all of the emotion is well and intact from earlier experiences. And as a side note, this is really how triggering works. What happens when you're triggered is that something bothers you in this moment that activates a lot of stored subconscious wounds and pain with all of the emotion intact. And now you're experiencing the pain from this moment and all the pain of all the negative emotions flooding forward, linked to those subconscious memories, sort of in a filing cabinet. So what you need to do in order to convince your subconscious mind and equilibrate the stored emotion of something is just like in that job interview example. You want to say to the person, I'm good enough because I have this experience and I have that education and I have this leadership award, and you want to be able to actually find the opposing pieces of proof. So let's scale that back now and use that in the example of those two partners. There's a dismissive partner who comes home cold and withdrawn, and there's the anxious partner who's really taking that personally. And let's say she feels her negative emotion and she goes, okay, what emotions am I feeling? I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling rejected, I'm feeling hurt. And she goes, okay, what am I believing about this situation? Oh, I'm believing my partner doesn't care about me, and I am unloved, and I am alone because he's withdrawn. And this is what the mind does. If you pay close attention, our mind is doing this so often throughout the day, thousands of times throughout the day. So let's say she goes, okay, I know this exercise, I've been doing this work, and she goes, I am unloved by my partner. Is it true? And can I absolutely know this is true? Can I really truly know that this is truth, or could this just be something activated within me? And let's say she goes, you know what? I think it's not true. And then she has to find the opposing pieces of proof. And this is actually what starts to equilibrate the emotions, okay? And think of it this way. If you feel -5 on one end of pain, okay? Like I feel -5 emotional activation towards being unloved. Like I'm 5 out of 10 pretty hurt. You kind of want to find like 5 out of 10 positive on the other side for the opposite of what your story is. So she would want to find some pieces of proof that make her feel loved by her partner, about 5 out of 10 on the positive side. So she doesn't have to feel like her partner's the most loving human in the world, but she has to find some things that are going to help to elicit an emotional response in opposition. And this is basically your conscious mind changing the neural pathway that your subconscious mind is used to firing. So what she would do is go, okay, what are some examples of how my partner has actually been loving lately? And maybe she goes, yesterday he did this really kind thing for me, and, I can tell that he's always showing up in the relationship, and it may be something other than him not loving me. I know him enough to know that, when he's really stressed, he becomes cold, and it's not about me, it's more about the situation and how he copes with it. And she wants to find like a few pieces of proof. You're generally looking for 3 to 4 solid pieces of proof in opposition of what belief pattern or story you're running. And what you'll actually feel is that you're using your conscious mind to repattern the subconscious program that would just run on autopilot and grow, because remember that cycle tends to refeed on itself. So she feels unloved, and then she feels like nobody loves her, and then she feels all alone in the world if she doesn't make this conscious and do something with it. And if we don't use our emotions as the feedback they are to go inwards and change the story and equilibrate the perception, remember, these things just get wired more and more deeply on the negative side over time. And it tends to happen in sort of polarity. So we tend to be in a state of positively spiraling upwards or negatively spiraling downwards quite quickly. If you've ever had the experience, I was speaking to somebody the other day, and they were saying to me, I got cut off while I was driving on the way to work, and they started doing this work, and they were saying, and then I started thinking about how everybody's a terrible driver, about how I just got a new car, it's going to get ruined, about how Canada's an unsafe place, about how everything is going wrong in my life. And this is what happens. Because that cycle of beliefs to thoughts to emotions and actions tends to keep refeeding on itself. We don't tend to stop at one point. It tends to get exacerbated, and then we experience more and more pain. So think about what happens if you don't break the cycle. You feel unloved, and then how do you treat your partner when you're believing those thoughts? How do you show up in the relationship when you let those things run on autopilot? So you really want to take part in these action steps so that you can start using your conscious mind to be in charge of your subconscious mind. And again, through repetition and emotion of this application, through repeatedly just practicing only these core steps, you will start to reprogram yourself, and these patterns will stop coming back. So again, your reticular activating system as well will tend to focus more on the positive when that's what you're consciously and intentionally feeding. So as you go through these steps, this is your first reprogramming exercise, and I'm going to dive into all reprogramming exercises in the last module of this course. But for now, just on the belief level, I want you to remember these steps specifically. Number one, you want to use the emotion that you're experiencing as a feedback mechanism to go inwards and reflect instead of outwards and just react on autopilot. Number two, question the belief itself, okay? What am I believing about the situation, and can I actually know that it's true? And number three, after you've questioned it, try to find opposing proof on the other side of the opposite. So again, if you're in that job interview, you'd be like, I have this award, this experience. If you're the person with the partner, you might say, okay, my partner loved me this way and was loving the other day that way. And remember, this is not for anybody but you and your own subconscious mind, so that you can be in charge of how you're feeling, of what you're reprojecting onto your external environment. And again, because your beliefs tend to become self-fulfilling prophecies over time. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're this woman and you think, I'm all alone, and then you get angry and you're hurt, and then you yell at your partner because you think that your partner is the reason that you're feeling so alone. You're going to push this person away over time, and you're moving towards your fears, not away from them. And this goes for everything. So we want to make sure we can make these things conscious, do the work to reprogram them, minimize our own suffering over time, create a clearer picture of our external reality, and be in charge of our emotional state. So this is one of the very first ways you can start neutralizing the limiting beliefs that you're carrying at a subconscious level. So one thing I really want to add is that sometimes we will find our own resistance to letting go of these old beliefs. So you'll hear me say that this is there's sometimes a perceived benefit for maintaining beliefs. So one thing I want you to know is that every single decision we make is because consciously plus subconsciously, through our whole totality of our mind, we perceive more negative than positive. So sometimes when we're holding on to a belief and we don't want to let it go, it's because we like to protect ourselves to a certain degree, or at least there's an assumption that we are protecting ourselves. So I'll give you an example. This man, and one of his beliefs about himself was, I am a failure. And he really didn't want to let it go. And when we looked at his life, he had all this proof for how he had succeeded in so many ways. And when we dug into, okay, why do you want to hold on to this story or this belief that you're a failure? What came up for him was that at the very beginning of starting his career, he actually started, he was an entrepreneur, and he tried to start his first business in something he loved so much. It was like the career of his dreams. And that business failed very early on. So he went into something else that he felt was safer, and he still had all these successful businesses. But he was so devastated by that first failure that his subconscious mind was unwilling to let go of that story, because he was so afraid of taking ownership that dream still existed within him and exposing himself to the potential of failing at something he truly loved again. So if you find that you have a little bit of resistance to letting go or releasing a certain belief, which won't happen often, maybe 3 to 5% of the time I'll see people have this experience, ask yourself, how do I think this is serving me to hold on to this story? And you'll see some really beautiful things come up for you in terms of even deeper levels of awareness as you're going throughout this experience. So in this next module, I'm going to go through our thoughts and emotions. And we're going to dig way into our different individual emotional patterns, what emotions really are, how they're here to serve us, and then some thought repatterning and reprogramming, and a really cool exercise, one of my favorites, before we move into the deep reprogramming rituals that we can take part in to really create long-lasting change. So this brings us to exercise 5, which is all about transforming limiting beliefs. So the purpose of this exercise is to isolate your subconscious core beliefs in a situation and work to equilibrate them now by finding opposing pieces of evidence. This will assist you in creating emotional relief, and the repetition of this when triggered or frustrated will actually reprogram these beliefs over time. So again, isolate the problem. Name a challenge in your life where you feel disempowered or blocked. So just for clarity's sake, I'm going to keep using similar examples so that there's not all this new information for you guys to process, because I do recognize that this is a pretty in-depth course and it can be new to a lot of people. So we're just going to use the example of mom being critical, like we were talking about earlier. Okay. And so we're looking, mom being critical. Okay, well, what do I make that mean, or why is that bad? And what's the core I am belief? And you can just, once you start getting clear in your paradigms, you're going to know, oh my gosh, I am unloved is a really big one, or oh my gosh, I am unworthy is a really big one, I am disliked is a really big one. So you're just really trying to get that interpretation. So maybe you go, I am unloved. Okay, so I want you to notice that every time mom criticizes you, you're not like, oh, mom's being critical again. You're actually feeling and emotionally experiencing that mom doesn't love you every time she criticizes you. And that's the emotional reality your subconscious mind is living in. So no wonder it hurts 9 out of 10, right? So we want to question that, because we've given that meaning. And usually we gave that meaning originally at some point in time where we couldn't properly emotionally process what was happening. And then we built up over time this whole stored perception in the way we experience mom's criticism. So you might have started feeling that way, for all you know, when you were 2 or 3 years old and classical conditioning started and you started getting criticized, and you're like, oh my gosh, mom was unconditionally loving me not that long ago, before, when I couldn't walk, or when I was really, really dependent, and all of a sudden, is mom loving me less? Wow. And every time mom criticizes, you might make it mean I'm unloved, I'm unloved, I'm unloved.